Well, good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me to come and speak to you a little bit about what's going on in Pinecrest, and I actually would like to expand beyond the confines of our geographic borders and talk a little bit more about South Miami-Dade County, because we have over the past couple of years built a really wonderful coalition. We call it the South Dade Municipal Coalition, between Cutler Bay, Palmetto Bay, Pinecrest, South Miami, and Coral Gables. And on many municipal issues, we are working in harmony and in coalition to advance the best interests of all of our communities. So I will, before I conclude, try to touch upon some of the most topical of issues that we are dealing with in coalition. I'll go back a little bit and tell you very briefly a little bit more about my entree into the political arena, and then what I have worked to advance in terms of community and public engagement in the village of Pinecrest. I am a hometown girl. I was raised in what is now Pinecrest. When my family moved back to Miami, my parents were both graduates of University of Miami, and it was for my father to come back to the university to attend law school. So we moved 3 blocks from Palmetto Elementary School, as it turned out, and I am a proud graduate of all 3 Palmetto schools. And in fact, we are in the midst of creating an alumni association for Palmetto Senior High School, which should be fully functional in the next couple months. We've filed articles of incorporation, and we're working on the bylaws now. We've got 50 years worth of graduates who I am hopeful will want to be engaged in doing what they can to support Miami Palmetto Senior High School. As a result of the legislature's unwillingness to really invest in public education the way that we should have in the state, and I speak from experience, having had a term in the legislature over a decade ago. Even in a community like Pinecrest, the public schools are really suffering because their funding comes from a little bit of local public effort, but the mandate, and it's a constitutional mandate, for excellent public education hasn't really been fulfilled by the Florida legislature over the years. Instead, they are funding charter schools and vouchers and all kinds of other areas to what I tend to think is more an effort to take public dollars and put them in the hands of private interests, which is a lot of what happens with the charter school movement. That's for another day. But one of the things that draws young families to the village of Pinecrest still is the expectation for excellent public schools. So I see it as one of the important priorities for our village to do what we can to support our schools. So toward that end, after I was elected, I created several new advisory groups to engage more of our community in participating in local government. For a community as highly educated and affluent as Pinecrest is, I think it's even more important when we aren't grappling with many of the issues that a lot of our sister cities have to deal with in terms of crime and poverty and drugs and different challenges. I see it as our responsibility to really tap into the energy and resources of our residents and do what we can to set examples for being much more proactive. And we are doing that in the arena of sustainability, going green. We've created a green action plan. We have wonderful, sustainable codes now, our land use code, our building code, to incentivize people to come in and think about being more energy efficient in the way they build. We've got wonderful recycling. We do a Earth Day festival every year to educate and excite the community on different issues like that. And I have an education advisory committee, and I think it's the only one like it, I know, in the county, maybe in the state of Florida. Every month I have the 5 local school principals, their PTAs, our school board member, Dr. Feldman, community activists or parents whose kids attend or used to attend the public schools, our local librarian. I now have people from the teachers, the UTD, that also attend. We meet every month and we talk about what are the challenges, what can the community do to come together to support the 5 schools. The 5 principals, 3 elementary schools, a middle school and a high school, are able to sit down once a month and hear what's going on in the other schools, which, believe it or not, is highly unusual. They don't typically have the opportunity to do that. We've brought in all kinds of new programs and initiatives. We have provided new resources for all 5 of the schools, and we have just last month concluded a project called the Smarty Dogs for Smart Schools program. You might have seen some of the fiberglass dogs that were painted by local artists that were all over the Pinecrest community. And that was a project to raise money for smart boards for our local schools, because although we, as I said, we live in an affluent community, our schools are all about 50 years old, and they don't have the new technology that the brand new schools that are being built have. Smart boards are a 21st century education. I didn't know what they were until I served as principal for the day one year, it was about 3 years ago, at Pinecrest Elementary. And the principal took me into a classroom and showed me a smart board, which it's an interactive whiteboard. If you have ever seen news shows like on CNN, where the newscaster will touch the board and something else will come up on the board, it's actually interactive. It also brings up into the classroom anything that you can bring up on the internet. So it is what I consider a 21st century classroom environment, and we were not providing it. We still are not providing it in every classroom. So after seeing that, my goal became, you know the old saying, a chicken in every pot. So my new saying is a smart board in every classroom, in every school in Pinecrest. They are expensive, about not quite $3,000 a pop. So even after doing the Smarty Dog project, raising $50,000 at an auction, selling the dogs so that each of the schools will walk away with $10,000, which we're awarding to them tomorrow night. $10,000 only buys about 3 smart boards for each school, and I've gotten an updated count for all 5 schools. We're still short 170 classrooms. So I have a lot of walking and talking to do to try and identify other ways that we can raise funds for our schools. So that's one of the initiatives, and it's actually grown beyond just our 5 local schools in Pinecrest, and we are taking on a broader look at the entire South Dade region and working on other initiatives. For example, Dr. Feldman has an incredible program that is in its 3rd year, and it's called the Summer College Tour Institute. I would love for them to come and be able to present to you on that after hearing about scholarships because it's an amazing program that targets middle school students. And it's a summer program. They give them a 1-month summer college institute where for 3 weeks they actually get classroom guidance and instruction, strategy, and understanding from a middle school perspective what it takes to get into college, how to prepare a plan for the coursework, the community involvement, the different kinds of things that schools will look for, the test taking that has to be prepared for. And they do the same with the parents in terms of scholarships that are available. And then the last week of the program, they actually take them on a tour of all of the colleges in the state of Florida. So the students will then come back, first of all, with a real belief and a dream that they can attend college. And here's what it's going to take to get there. So for those families who can afford, it's approximately $500 for that 1-month program, including the tour, then it's a very smart month to invest in for your child. But for all of those families that can't afford that, they raise money for scholarships. And this year they, I believe they've raised about $25,000, $30,000 so that students from, actually it goes all the way down to Homestead, but it is really confined to South Dade County. They are able to have as many students go on scholarship as go with funding from their parents. I went to the graduation ceremony last summer at the end of the summer, and if you ever want an uplifting, inspiring experience, I would invite you to attend just the graduation ceremony to see what happens to these students. This was a room full of middle school students, about 100 students, that, believe it or not, there was not a peep in the audience. They were very focused and very respectful, and it was quite impressive, I must say, to see what came over these students after participating and how committed they became to advancing themselves and doing what they could to get into college and get support for a dream that they may have had or came to have after that experience. So the Educational Advisory Group is a wonderful experience for me. Our municipal coalition meets once a month, the cities that I named before, and all of us have issues with the US 1 corridor because we all border it in one way or another. So we will frequently talk about transit and transportation and how we fit into the bigger picture, or how we're ignored in South Dade in that bigger picture, and how we can take a stronger position to support our issues and our needs vis-a-vis development and orientation. In fact, in Pinecrest now, we are conducting a US 1 visioning initiative, because all along US 1, we are pretty much strip shopping center after strip shopping center. And many of them are 50 and 60 years old and are coming close to their useful life, and developers are coming in and looking at what they might be interested in. So we want those developers to know what our vision is for the US 1 corridor and not theirs. And toward that end, we have a steering committee, we're going to do a charrette, and we're looking forward to being able to provide both beautification and a much broader look at how we can engage our own community. Nobody wants a downtown Dadeland. That's one of the things Pinecrest fought against in terms of high-rises and too much density. But on the other hand, we want to be sure that we can accommodate the needs of what we would like the US 1 corridor to be in the next 20, 30 years and have that be our vision. So that's something we're engaging some of the commercial property owners who have an interest in participating, as well as our residents, in doing that. And the other issue that has really been a high priority for the Village Council in Pinecrest, as well as many of our neighboring cities, is Florida Power and Light. And the proposal by Florida Power and Light to put these, I call them monstrosities, because that's really what they are, 100-foot plus power lines all along US 1 from 136th Street north to I-95. Now, the reason for proposing new transmission lines, and believe it or not, there are currently no transmission lines along US 1. There are some distribution lines, but they are lower poles and lower impact visually and lower wattage in terms of the strength of the lines. But what they are proposing these lines is because they've been proposing the building of 2 new nuclear power plants at Turkey Point sometime in the distant future. And when Florida Power and Light came out with this proposal in 2008, 2009, it was shortly after I was elected, and we were all on the Village Council uniformly horrified at the notion of putting those monstrosities up along US 1. So we have been engaged in battle with Florida Power and Light ever since, and we are joined by South Miami, Coral Gables, and the City of Miami in what has now been litigation for the last 2.5 years. What the utilities did back in 2006, 2007 in preparation for proposing new nuclear power plants, it was Florida Power and Light and Progress Energy, the 2 biggest utilities in Florida, was to sit down with the Florida legislature, who they pretty much control, and rewrite the laws to allow them to have the structures in place to make life easy for the utilities, not so easy for those of us impacted by them. So they did 2 things. The Transmission Line Siting Act, they rewrote that law to their benefit, and the Siting Act now says if a utility wants to put in a new transmission line, they make their proposal, and it will pretty much get rubber stamped by the Public Service Commission, the Department of Environmental Protection, unless somebody contests it. And if somebody comes to contest it, then the burden shifts to the person who is opposing, or the entity that is opposing the utility. And that's what we faced. It was a law that had been rewritten to the advantage of the utility company. And it said, if you don't like the proposal for their transmission line, you must submit your own proposal and fund your own proposal, which has had huge financial consequences to us. So that's what we've done. We've entered into litigation. We have submitted a proposal for an alternate corridor, which we were required to do. Now, we didn't want to say, well, don't put it in our neighborhood. Put it in their neighborhood over there. So initially we looked at proposing the corridor go along the turnpike to 836 and then take 836 east to the downtown area. But both the turnpike and the MDX Expressway Authority said, no, 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 we're not going to let you do that to us. So that would be a fatal flaw to propose a corridor where another entity would have come in and said, no, there's no way we would approve of that. So instead, we ended up looking at the current corridor, the corridor that was actually built when they built Turkey Point over 40 years ago. And that corridor goes from the Davis substation, which is southwest of us, and it cuts through actually the Kendall area, you know, where those transmission lines are by the golf club, the Cuidador, is that what it's still called? Whatever that golf club is. off of 97, and then it ends up going to 8th Street and takes 8th Street into downtown. So we said, take that corridor you already have and upgrade it or underground it. And that's our alternate corridor. Now, we've been very frustrated because Florida Power and Light is actually going into the Kendall and West Kendall neighborhood associations and misleading them into saying, well, Pinecrest and Coral Gables don't want anything in their neighborhoods, so they're trying to push something into your neighborhood. And they aren't honestly describing it as, you know those lines that are already there, well, they want them upgraded or undergrounded. And that's all we are doing at this point. The bigger issue really is, do we want 2 new nuclear power plants in Turkey Point? Pinecrest is 15 miles from Turkey Point. When we were growing up, I have friends who camped at Turkey Point. Think about the mindset that we had back then and we have now about nuclear power plants. And this has become, over the 3.5 years that I've been in this office, a major focus for me in terms of learning and understanding about production of energy, energy efficiency, what we could and should be doing as a state to create an energy profile, which we do not have, energy policy in the state, which we do not have. We don't have one nationally. But I've gotten very involved in the issue at the state level and at the national level. I'm now on the National League of Cities Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Committee to really learn and understand what is going on with energy policy all over this country. And Florida, very sadly, is somewhere, I'd say, between the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages in terms of what we are and we are not doing with energy policy, advancing energy efficiencies, and what we could and should be doing. So that has become a major focus. The other law that the utilities passed in 2006 and 7 was early cost recovery for nuclear power, which is an additional add-on subsidy we all pay. We've been paying it to Florida Power and Light ever since it was passed. They've raised over $300 million. Their proposal, when they first said they wanted to build 2 new nuclear power plants, was that it would be somewhere around this year or next year where they would start the construction. They're now pushing it off to 2022. So they will be collecting that extra subsidy for the next 10 years. If they choose to not build it, and the reality is they will not build it, they get to keep all the money that they are collecting now. And why will they not build it? Because the price tag has gone from a proposed estimate of $8 billion to now a price tag of $20 billion to build those 2 new nuclear power plants. Many of us believe that what they are doing at this point is using that as a fiction to be able to collect this extra subsidy. So we have been fighting that as a coalition, not just in Miami-Dade County, but throughout the state of Florida. We are trying to urge the repeal of the early cost recovery statute and to fight the Public Service Commission on allowing them every year to collect an additional subsidy for these nuclear power plants, which will likely never be built. What do we do for power? Let them do what they're doing now and create new natural gas powered plants that are the cheapest way for them to be going at this point in time. And number 2, really focus on energy efficiency, which has never been done in the state because it's not in their financial interest to do that. The more energy that's consumed, the more benefit to their stockholders. And the latest insult, and it really is an insult, it should be to every ratepayer in Florida, they are now asking for a rate increase. This year, they have gone back to the Public Service Commission and they are asking for an additional rate increase. Why? Because they want their stockholders to get a higher return on investment. from 10.5 to 11.5. And they make no secret of saying that. So we are fighting that as well. Last month, the Village of Pinecrest passed a resolution opposing the early cost recovery statute. I brought in my municipal coalition to a meeting last week. I'm asking my neighboring cities and other cities through the League of Cities to also pass resolutions to oppose the rate increase and to intervene in the case. And I'm trying to get as much grassroots, and that's you all, support as possible to understand it's a real consumer protection issue. And already AARP has intervened in the rate increase case, Retail Association, the Hospital Association, and I'm hopeful that cities and counties throughout their ratepayer district will do the same thing and oppose it, because we're still in a tough economy, and for them to say our stockholders need a higher return on investment is really an insult. So these are some of the things that we are working on at the municipal level, and I'm really proud of the relationship that we are building with our sister cities in South Dade County. We're about to start a property assessed clean energy district. Some of you might have heard of. It's called the Green Corridor, and that